welcome. This is Zero Limits Living. I'm Dr. Joe Vitale. Every week, I bring you inspiration and information to transform your life. This week is going to be fantastic because we're going to be listening to the sound of music, more or less. This show has become so popular, you can now see it or hear it on 1,000 platforms, probably anything you can name, including Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire, YouTube, and a whole lot more. I'm putting all the shows in one place so you can go there and binge. Go to ZeroLimitsLivingTV.com, ZeroLimitsLivingTV.com. Next, be sure to get your Miracles Coaching consultation. I started Miracles Coaching almost 20 years ago, and it's trademarked, it's proven, it's a system that works. But find out what it's all about and if it'll work for you. Go to miraclescoaching.com. No charge, no obligation. Next, I have a new program that's already become a bestseller. It's called Mental Time Travel. mentaltimetravelsystem.com. I know, what in the world is that? We'll go to mentaltimetravelsystem.com and find out. And now let's go to the matter at hand. We're going to be talking about music. The author today has written a book called Wired for Music, which is outstanding. It's a search for health and joy through the science of sound. If you look behind me, you'll see guitars. And if you were in my office, you'd see harmonicas, ocarina, a synthphone, miniature guitars, thumb pianos, and I forget what else is in here. I'm into music. And we want to find out how we are wired for music. And maybe we are, maybe we aren't. Adriana Barton is my guest. Thank you for making time to be here. Did you do any music today?
I listen to music just before I talk, which is something I do. It's evidence-based to pump you up before a speaking or sporting event. It's actually been studied in those contexts. But first, I want to tell you how pleased I am to be here, Joe. You've
Ah,
inspired so many people with your work over many years. So it's really an honor to be on your program.
wow. Well, you shouldn't begin with a compliment like that because it takes my breath away, makes me speechless, and fries my brain. I'm all kidding aside. Thank you very much. That's very kind of you. And thank you for agreeing to be here. I have several questions for you, but I'm just going to let it ramble a little bit and we'll do what I sometimes call popcorn, just see what pops up. And I want to begin by just asking, why did you write the book? Something fascinated you, something interested you, because as an author, I know this is not an overnight thing. You had to commit and research and travel. Why?
Well, I'll tell you, it's a long story and I'll try and shorten it. But
That's
I
all right.
was a health journalist for many years at Canada's national newspaper, the Globe and Mail. And increasingly, I saw studies coming across my desk making these claims about music that had never occurred to me, like showing that music stimulates dopamine in the brain, showing that music is helpful for people with Parkinson's, showing that music soothes the anxiety and the depression that people feel in dementia, and
Mm.
lots of questions around whether music made kids more intelligent. I mean, the jury is out there. In fact, it's not out, it's been disproven. But there was all this wealth of neuroscience research being done while I was at the paper, and this work continues. But I also had a personal link to this story. So I was approached by a publisher asking me if I had any book ideas. And I said, well, just this geeky stuff around the science of music. And then he said, well, tell me more about that. And I mentioned that I had studied to be a professional cellist. It was something I did for 17 years. And I ended up having to end this pursuit in my early 20s. It was probably one of the hardest decisions in my life. I was injured. I had sort of an emotional breakdown around what was all this for, all this effort, all this perfectionism. What was it doing to me? Was it healthy? What was it all about? So I turned my back on music for many years. And so the book is kind of drawing together. It's a story of reclaiming music in my life,
Mhm.
learning the science of what it is in our species, what it can do for our bodies, and also coming to terms with my own musical baggage.
This is fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Well, the studies go on as synchronicity has it. Just before this call, just before we started our interview here, I saw a study that said rats dance to music. Rats
I
dance to music.
I
This was
saw
this.
that too.
Did you
Yes,
see this?
I
I only
did.
saw it literally minutes ago. It was a study in Tokyo, and it was about
Uh-huh.
rats, and it was on. There's a network called Nice News
Uh-huh.
com, which I recommend to everybody because there's too many not nice news sites out there. Nice News .com. So it's just fascinating that all of this is going on. But in your little introduction there, you mentioned that there was a study disproving that kids learn better with music. What was that? Because you kind of hit it and ran. Do you?
Yes. Sorry about that. I was
That's
trying
all
to
right,
give
but
an overview. Can
yeah,
I talk about the rats for a second first?
of course, rats to teenagers. Let's go. Let's
Yeah,
go in that
okay, it's all
direction.
connected, right?
Right, right.
Well, what they found in that rat study was that there was a small range of rhythmic pulses in terms of frequency that
Mm,
the rats could synchronize their movements to, but it was relatively narrow. What's amazing about humans is that we can clap or dance or play music in time to a wide range of beats, very slow to very complex to very fast.
yeah.
It was just interesting that rats could do it at all because for the longest time they didn't see musicality in animals. It's only
Ah,
recently in the cockatoo, the Taco Bell, the cockatoo on the Taco
mhm,
Bell ad, and then certain sea creatures, sea mammals. They're starting to see rhythmic. I mean, people talk about bird songs and whales, but that's different. It's their language, their communication system, which is different
mhm.
from voluntarily in training to a beat with your body. And so it is amazing to see this in animals, but our abilities are much broader than a rat's might be. So that's
Okay.
just to touch on the rats. It's still super cool research and brand new, and an
Yeah, they
ability that
put little miniature headphones on them, I understand.
yes, I wish they could. I'd like to see a video, to be
I know
honest, of
there's a
that.
YouTube video hit for you right there. Let's see the
Okay.
dancing rats.
Yeah,
Well,
fantastic. But back to kids.
yeah,
Now, it wasn't one study showing that music doesn't make them more intelligent. It's been dozens.
really?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the music people would really love to tell us that music training and that music listening makes kids smarter, improves their IQ, helps them perform better in school. But when you really drill down to it, and now they've done quite a few randomized trials and a lot of mega reviews where they look at the entire body of research. And what they're seeing is that there are probably pre-existing personality traits that explain why kids seem to perform better in school when they have music training. There are other things going on. It's still
Uh-huh.
incredibly beneficial in all kinds of ways, but it doesn't boost IQ.
That's shocking right there because now let's look at the other end of the spectrum. Haven't there been research that shows that for the elderly it helps? Or is
It
that disproven too?
Well, this I will say is early days research.
Mhm.
It's
Mm,
preliminary research and it is promising. They're not
okay.
saying that elderly people suddenly get smarter, but there's some suggestion that it might help older people retain some of their cognitive functions or slightly improve once it's declined. So there was an amazing study in Florida done with retirees between the ages of 65 and 80, and these people enrolled in piano lessons for the first time in their lives. So that's something to do that at 65,
Yeah.
And they were taking a lesson a week and then practicing a minimum of 3 hours a week on top of that. And after 6 months, they showed slight boosts in short-term memory tests compared to their baseline scores and compared to similar retirees who hadn't taken the piano lessons. That's one study, and it's really exciting. But we need a lot more of those to say definitively that music will help you retain your cognition as you age.
Okay, you're jamming my brain a little bit because maybe I've fallen for the marketing of music because for decades I'm approaching 70. So for decades I've been hearing that children I've even heard babies play classical music when the baby's in the crib. It is going to influence them. All right, I'm going to stop there. Is that true?
What it does do is it broadens their minds. It makes them open to that type of music. One thing that's
Mhm.
quite amazing, they have demonstrated that if you play music to an unborn baby,
Yeah.
that music will show responses to the familiar music that they don't show to music they didn't hear in the womb.
Hmm.
So that's amazing. But it doesn't have to be classical. It could be jazz. It could be the Grateful Dead. So they're seeing that babies remember the music they heard in the womb. They can hear it and they can remember it, but it doesn't make them smarter. That whole babies making them smarter was something called the Mozart effect, and it
Yes.
has been thoroughly debunked. And in the book, I think it's chapter 4, I go through this science and show how deeply it's been studied and how, again, there's so many benefits to music, but boosting IQ by listening to music is not a thing.
Wow. What about increasing creativity? You're an author. I'm an author. We're both been musicians here. Does it help boost creativity?
I would say yes. I mean, from the work I've done, I would say yes. There's one psychiatrist who describes music as a quote flexibility primer, meaning it primes the brain to think outside the box and get out of the usual creative ruts or thinking ruts. And
Mhm.
certainly, they've shown that Nobel Prize winners, a disproportionate number of Nobel Prize winners compared to regular scientists have been involved in the arts, particularly music. And so
Oh,
they've even gone to the beginning of the Nobel Prize from the early 1900s and shown the percentages of Nobel Prize winners who have been involved. And the idea is it kind of cross pollinates your
hmm,
pursuits and helps
hmm,
you, as I said, think in a different mindset. And
yeah,
Einstein, his wife, and his son both talked about how he didn't say this himself, but the people around him noticed he would work on his equations and get frustrated and then go into his music room and plink on the piano a bit or pull out his violin and
yeah.
then go back and find new ways of dealing with his mathematical problems. So he used it as a tool to give himself a different way of looking, get outside the rut. He would use that himself quite regularly, apparently.
And does the research with the Nobel Prize winners, for example, show that it was listening to music or actually playing music that made the difference?
It seems that many are playing music.
They're
So there
playing
was,
music.
yeah, there
Yeah.
was one who played the bongos
Mhm.
there was one who played the bongos in vaudeville shows, and others who play the bassoon or the piano or were conductors or composers on the side. So quite
Yeah.
a lot of creative work, active work with music, not the passive listening as much. But the idea is that even passive listening could also broaden your mind and creativity. And the psychiatrist who talked about it as a flexibility primer pointed out that when we're sitting there listening to music, there are many things going on, and our brain might follow the drums or then follow the guitar or then experience it as a whole. We're constantly having different textures and possibilities. And I don't know about you, but I've listened to the same song sometimes years in a row and keep hearing different things. And that's
Right.
our mind picking out different things. Our mind is being creative in
Mm.
finding a new experience through something that's familiar.
There was one study in your book that was talking about aging, and you quoted the author, who I don't have in front of me, as saying you need to listen to different music, and if you're playing music, play different music or a different instrument to, I'll use the word, shock your brain to get it to make new pathways. Otherwise, you're just going down the same road, just like driving to the store on the same road all the time, and there's no newness to it, so it doesn't awaken you. Have you found that to be true?
Well, this is what the research shows, and it's
Yeah.
certainly it was Daniel Levitin who wrote the
Yeah.
seminal book called "This Is Your Brain on Music," who made that point that
Uh,
in general for neuroplasticity, which is the ability of the brain to change, you have to challenge it in new ways. So, yes, playing the same song every Sunday on your banjo might not give you the same if you pick up the drums sometimes or learn to
Yeah.
dance or challenge yourself in that way. The other research I found fascinating
Hmm.
was that they were looking at brain shrinkage and comparing non musicians, musicians, and amateur musicians. And
Hmm.
out of those three groups, it was actually the amateur musicians who had the plumpest, healthiest brain. And the idea was that the professional musicians were always doing the same thing and perhaps not enriching their lives with sports or learning another language or
Hmm.
traveling because they were so fixated on mastering the instrument and performing that instrument. So the idea is we want music to be part of a broad range of things that we challenge our minds to do, not just that one
Hmm.
thing. And so
Hmm.
that's a great takeaway for me because for years I only did the cello and now
Yeah.
I've branched out to different instruments and I've even joined a choir and challenged myself in these ways.
Yeah, I saw that you had picked up the ukulele in the book and you went to a choir towards the back of the book. I saw all of those different things. Have you done something else since writing and publishing the book?
I'll be honest, promoting the book has taken up a lot of my time this fall. I've been very
I I've
fortunate.
told I've told people writing the book's the easy part. Now you have to go out there and tell the world about what you have done with your book. So totally understand that.
Well, it's
You
actually been a great pleasure, and I've been
good.
surprised by how many different types of people are interested in this book. And I've been
Mhm.
approached to speak for medical faculties.
Mhm.
So, writing people want to know about my book, teachers, parents, music therapists. Musicians, of course, and I've even been invited to talk at an international conference on trauma, the treatment of trauma. So I've been really amazed by the interest because I'm a first time author. But it's I've had to just stick with the different instruments I play now. I haven't taken up a brand new one since last month when my book came out.
Well, I thought you might take something more portable since you're now going to get on planes and travel to do these events, pick up a harmonica or an ocarina or something so that you can play on the plane or in the car. But,
Great
and
idea.
I want to congratulate you on your book because it is exceedingly well written. And you did something with a journalistic, science-based book that a lot of other authors might not have chosen to do. And that is you've included yourself. In other words, your story of your wounds and your injury with playing the music for 17 years and so forth, and your wrestling with all that is woven in to your research and your sharing of the recent findings. And I found that riveting because I'm not just reading a book of scientific studies. I'm reading a book who has brought these studies by an author who's brought these studies to life in her own life. And then by proxy, I feel it and can appreciate it even more. So I'm just congratulating you on a job well done. So I'm not surprised at all that Wired for Music is being uh, shown interest by a lot of people, whether it's parents or the medical field. So congratulations on that.
Joe, you're going to make me cry.
Oh, no.
It was such a hard task to do, and to have it be recognized by you in this way means a lot to me.
How
It
long did
was
it take you to write the book?
um That's a difficult question because at some parts were written while I was full time, working as a
Mhm,
journalist, and other parts were written on the road, and then other
mhm,
long stretches were done during the pandemic. But if I
mm,
were to pull it all together, I would say off and on for 5 or 6 years, not counting
mhm,
all the years, not counting the Bachelor of Music degree or
yeah.
the many years of learning various instruments and that sort of thing.
Well, congratulations. Part of the reason I wanted you to say that is there's a lot of people who wanna write books, but they don't understand what it takes
Yeah.
to write a book. Some of my books have been very short and some have taken years. It all depends on the book and the study and the research and timing and everything else. So that's why I was asking. So let's go back here. You've been invited to speak in a lot of different places, but you said the medical field is also interested. Why is the medical field interested in music?
I think there's a growing understanding among doctors that we need things to help people feel good and feel safe in medical settings.
Hmm.
And also, there's growing awareness of the amount of research that's been done. And I was shocked by that myself. But I'll give you an example of
Hmm.
simple ways that music can improve patients' lives. Katie Couric, she had
Hmm.
breast cancer treatment this summer. And her radiologist asked her what music she'd like to play while receiving radiation therapy, which is not something you'd hear about 5, 10 years ago. And I was so pleased to read that
Wow.
because it's a simple thing one can offer patients and it actually helps. So
Hmm.
music has been studied head to head with Valium type drugs to treat pre-operative or pre-surgery acute anxiety in people in hospital settings, and it works. And again, I'm not talking about one study, I'm talking about dozens of studies validated by the Cochrane Group, which is an international evidence based medicine group. They're very stringent about what they give a thumbs up to. And they said music is effective as a treatment for acute anxiety for surgery patients, and it has no side effects, you know? So, this is something very simple one can offer without the risk of side effects. Not everyone wants to take Valium before surgery, or you could do both. You could do the Valium
Hmm.
and the music. And in the studies, generally, people have listened to music that they find pleasing for about 30 minutes before the surgery, perhaps the night before, depending on how the study was designed. It's so simple.
I love it. I love it. I love it. What music are they listening to? I heard you just say it's music they found pleasing. So was it up to the patient? Was the patient just told, bring 30 minutes worth of music on your iPhone and you're going to listen to that? Or were there suggestions?
As you said, well, as I said, there it wasn't one study; it was dozens, and
Yeah.
so the study design varied. Different types of study
Hmm.
design, but typically a patient is offered. They need to control the variables. You know how that works in science.
Hmm.
They can't have every single type offered, but they'll usually give a selection of maybe 10 tracks, and some will be sort of calming new age music, some will be classical, some will be light jazz, and the patient will pick. But what they're finding in general with other research is that if a patient feels a sense of choice and they're allowed to pick the music they like most, they're more likely to have the benefits. The
Uh,
reason for that I can explain.
hmm. Please do. Please explain.
So, this has been thoroughly verified. Music actually stimulates the pleasure and reward pathways in the brain. And
Mm.
it stimulates them using the same pathways that are stimulated by chocolate or sex or cocaine. It actually stimulates the same areas in the brain. And this is important because it is through that pleasure and reward circuitry that we see a lot of the health benefits of music. So the calming anxiety, the helping with depression, the relaxation is all happening through stimulating that pleasure reward circuitry. So if you're
Mm.
not listening to music you like, you're probably not going to get the same benefits.
Mm.
So, patient choice and patient pleasure, it's very possible that the person who loves death metal, and they've even looked at this, might have some of the same benefits as the person who loves Bach, you know?
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's beautiful, and that is very good to hear. Well, let's look at the other extreme of this because this is the medical use of it and there's positive use of it, but you have a chapter in your book, I think it was called Bad Vibrations,
Great
a
memory. Yeah.
and that is dealing with the claims that some music like crystal healing, sound healing, what was it, Himalayan bowls, those I don't wanna put words in your mouth. What is what's the truth about that?
In that chapter, I looked at all the ways. So again, with medicine, if something is potent enough to offer a benefit, it usually could be used in a negative way or have some negative side effects. Otherwise, it's just neutral, and then it wouldn't do either, right? So
Mm.
I had
Mhm.
fun. I actually found that chapter fascinating to research because I wanted to know, is there any truth to the idea that some music is harmful, or how has music been used in negative ways in our species? And there's a whole section on torture using
Yeah.
music. So it's been used in Guantanamo Bay and in
Mhm.
other prisons with
Mhm.
during the war on terror, and some of the prisoners said it was worse hearing blaring music 24 hours a day that you could not stop, you could not block it out in any way. Some prisoners said it was worse than physical torture,
Mm.
which is quite interesting.
Mhm.
And they're not sure whether it was the excessive volume or the incessant aspect of it, just beating into your skull. People
Mhm.
found it unbearable, and it wasn't music that was unusual. It's music that the guards had on their playlists, but it was the way it was used and the people it was used upon. I mean, some of
Mm.
those prisoners have a religion that doesn't allow them to listen to Western music, so they actually felt that they were going against the will of their God while
Wow.
doing this, which added a whole other layer of difficulty in that experience for them. So
Mhm.
that was one example. But I also looked at how one person's music medicine might be another's poison. So that
Mhm.
you probably heard that in 7-Elevens, they've experimented with blasting classical music to keep teenagers from loitering, you know, and it
Yes.
works. They don't want
Yeah, they
anything to
left.
do with it. Yeah, yeah. And someone else might just be blissed out on that music. So that was interesting. And then I also look at there's just such a fine line but uh, between the healing aspects of music and claims about music that just don't hold up. So it would be wonderful if singing bowls cured cancer, but
Mm.
they don't. They're not going to have a special, divine vibration that will blast the cancer cells. That idea came from some legitimate science that was done looking at frequency waves at
Mhm.
thousands and thousands of times what you'd have in pregnancy in an ultrasound, like thousands of times. A singing bowl can't approach that the frequency of ultrasound at that
Mm.
level. That the super high frequency ultrasound will blast cancer cells, but a singing bowl will not. And unfortunately, people who want to overclaim or overblow the benefits of music will take something that's hard
Mm.
science and kind of run with it. And what we have to be careful, what singing bowls will do is help you relax. And
Ah.
it is also demonstrated in cancer patients by that evidence-based medicine group I talked about, Cochrane. It is demonstrated that it can relieve pain. Music can
Mm.
relieve pain in cancer patients. That is
Mhm.
well documented. So
Mhm.
let's stick with the things that are true and proven and leave the rest. The problem is if people are led to believe that singing bowls will cure cancer, unfortunately they might turn their back on some of the things that really will. we
That
we
would
can't.
help.
Yeah, like, I actually personally know people who have refused surgery and chemo and things like that for cancer and have died. And I
Mm.
cite a study showing how often the refuse, like complementary treatments, yes, let's do that for sure, but choosing them over what conventional medicine has to offer is a really bad idea if you have a
Mhm.
life-threatening illness.
I want to point out that you said they can help us relax, and based on my own experience and very limited research in health and healing, that word alone, if there's any way that we can help ourselves relax, we have increased the odds of our healing, our well-being, our state of tranquility, no matter what goes on. So if the singing bowls or Himalayan crystal bowls or whatever the different things are called helps them relax, and
I'm
that's
all
how
for
it's
it.
yeah,
I'm
and
all
that's how
for
it's
that.
sold. In other words,
Yeah.
it's not sold a bill of goods here, but if we're saying it'll help you relax, I'm all for it too. I say let's
Exactly.
do
It's more
more
the
of it.
mystical, cellular blah 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 that I raise my eyebrows at. But I'm all for. I mean, I did it myself. I tried the sound healing. It was wonderful. I
Mhm.
just have a problem when it's oversold or overblown or misleading for people.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a simple health hack that people can
Oh,
do to
please.
use music to relax. So, one thing that is amazing about our brains is that we have many frequency bands of oscillations of brain activity, brain waves
Mhm.
going at once. But it is demonstrated that our brain waves will start to synchronize with the steady pulse in music. And so
Mm.
and our brainwaves affect our levels of alertness and our levels of relaxation as well. And our heart rate is also affected by the musical rhythm, and our breathing rate, lots of parts of our physiology. And so if you want to relax, you want to choose music at about 60 to 80 beats per minute, about the pace of a resting heartbeat.
Mm,
Your system will start to match it. And
mm,
so it's very easy on Spotify or YouTube or other platforms to find playlists that are organized by BPM, beats per minute. And then you can select from those playlists which you love. So then you're kind of turbocharging it. You're getting the the pleasure rewards circuitry stimulated because you love the sound of it, and then you're getting
mm,
the 60 to 80 beats per minute that help your system calm
mm.
down. Together you will have a relaxation effect most likely.
That's a great health hack. What about the opposite of that? What if you're getting ready to run the 4-minute mile, or you're going to get on stage, or you're going to perform with your guitar and your band, or any number of things like that? And you want a peak performance experience. You want to be alert. You want to be sharp. You want to be present. What would be the beats, or what would be the peak performance hack?
And
If
that has been studied too quite rigorously. There are wonderful researchers in the area of sport and exercise psychology who
Mhm,
put people in labs and measure all their, you know, their
mhm,
physiological responses. And it's not just guessing. I mean, you're very insightful in asking that question, but it also has been rigorously studied. And for that pepping up, you want about 120 beats per minute or up. And interestingly, in a research looking at something like 74,000 selections of pop music, they found that 120 beats per minute was the most common
mhm.
pace for music to get people on the dance floor because it makes you want to
Ah,
move. And
right.
this is another little fun fact, if I may borrow from the Big Bang Theory. When we're lying in an MRI machine, perfectly still, and listening to music, the motor, meaning the movement areas of the brain, are activated. We
Mm.
want to move to music. Our brains want to move. Our brains want to stimulate our bodies to move to music, even if we're just listening and sitting still, which is really neat, I think.
If I'm in an MRI tube, the number one thing my brain wants to do is just get out.
Fair enough.
Just just get out. I don't care what the music is, it's not helping.
I haven't had the pleasure myself.
It's not fun. There was another interesting part in your book, ayahuasca, and the ayahuasca tea ceremony is really, I don't know if it's mainstream or not. I hear people talking about it, and they've been talking about it for years in the circles that I've been in. I've never done it. I actually played with the idea of, I wonder if there is a hypnotic way to do it, because I have a background in hypnotism, but I didn't
Yeah.
even do that. But you did it and tied it to music. Can you talk about that a little bit?
I was curious about ayahuasca for a long
Yeah.
time. I was in Peru and did the Inca Trail with my husband early on, and no, it was before we were even married. And I saw the handwritten signs for ayahuasca. This was a long time ago, and I was curious because I had friends who had done it, but I was also kind of afraid. And I wanted to do my research and make sure that I did it with a reputable group, and
Mm,
I think the time wasn't right. And so almost 20 years later, a friend did it with a group that I felt confident would be looking after all of the safety issues, and had the proper traditional training. I think you can't just take the drug out of the cultural context. It's a part of
mm,
a whole cosmology, a whole way of looking at the world.
mhm.
So I would caution people to be really careful. I mean, I was given a dietary regimen for a month in advance to follow
Oh,
because there are
wow.
interactions,
Mm,
and it got stricter and stricter the closer you got to the ceremony. And I followed it religiously, and they also had medic type people available. It was really, but also the practitioner had extensive training in Peru. So I felt that what was offered was something I could wrap my head around.
Mhm.
The reason, though, that I was interested was that this friend told me, um, it's really not about just the substance itself, that the music and the chanting that is done in the ceremony is a huge part of the transformative experience. So that's what got me hooked.
Yeah.
I had to know about that.
Mhm.
And so this was the enticing last straw that brought me to the ceremony and got me over my, it's natural to be nervous if that's not
Sure.
your normal
Of course. Of
thing to,
course.
but I was so curious. And sure enough, this friend was absolutely right. She said, when the music stops, everything stops. The ceremony stops, the visions stop,
Mm.
the energy in the room stops. And it was true. I did 2 nights, and every once in a while, the people making the I guess you could call it, there are traditional chants that are sung and whistled, and they'd have to take breaks periodically, and then the physical sensations that I was having would stop and the visions would stop. And they described the chants as a penetrating force that helps get the medicine in you. I
Mm.
mean, there are all kinds of, there's a lot of debate. I mean, ethnomusicologists and anthropologists and people from those cultures and people from outside who have experienced it. There are a lot of differences of opinion about what all of this means, but I certainly experienced something, and I described that in
Mm.
the book.
Mhm. And what about the music? What instrument was used? Because I think you said what it was in the book, but I don't remember the name of it.
It was mainly chanting and whistling and
Oh,
perhaps some rattles. There weren't any elaborate instruments used in that
okay.
ceremony. Yeah, there were
Well,
other ceremonies in the book, but not the ayahuasca.
okay,
That
but chanting.
other ceremonies that involve instruments.
One of the things you say in the book is that the musical instrument that we all have that we carry with us all the time is our own voice.
Yes.
And with that in mind, I have to admit, I've made 15 albums, 6 of them singer-songwriter albums, and I still don't like my voice. It took me forever to perform with my band of legends. I mean, I was terrorized by the idea of doing it for months. And I'm a guy who knows all kind of different ways to relax myself before going on stage. It was terrifying. Why do we have this love hate push pull with music, whether it's our own voice or our own instrument? I mean, a large part of your journey in the book is about your relationship with music for 17 years. Why does it seem like most of us don't feel like we're wired for music?
There's a lot to unpack in that question, and I do try to unpack it in the book, but I'll try
Mhm,
to summarize here. And unfortunately, in America and Canada and Western Europe, there was a big interruption in the type of music making that we made, and that
mm,
happened about 2,000 years ago. So in ancient Greece, everyone was part of music in informal settings all the time, and we know this because of the scrolls that were left and the way music was regarded. It was regarded as the way to channel the muses, which are the goddesses
mm,
of writing and arts and various other things. The muses. So
mhm,
music comes from the muses. The word
mhm,
itself comes from the muses, and so it was a way to channel divine wisdom and creativity into everyday life. And that was regarded. Music was seen as important in funerals and political rallies and everyday discussions and feasting and everything. And that carried on in ancient Rome. Paganism had music at every single event, the gladiator
mm,
fights, the parades, the feasting, the holidays. There was music day in, day out, and everyone was dancing, singing along, drumming, etc. Now, the early Christian fathers saw a problem there, because if
mm,
people are gyrating and having orgies and and believing in many gods, all of
mm,
that was not going to work for the Christian faith. And the early church fathers, I don't want to slam Christianity, but they were very clear in their writings. They literally said, abandon your drums and your flutes and your horns. They are tools of the more suited for beasts. essentially
Wow.
tools of the devil. And
Hmm.
so musical instruments were banned from worship altogether. You were not to have a musical instrument in church. You could sing in church, but that was it. You could have a harp at home, but that was it. And all other forms of instrument music making were discouraged. They continued, I'm sure, in people's homes outside of faith-based settings and weddings, and that's, I'm sure they didn't stop all music, but music, formal music, was stripped down. We got
Mm,
Gregorian chant, which many people find very beautiful, but it has no rhythm and no harmony, and it barely even leaps. It mostly moves in the steps in the on the you'd find on a piano, and it was only sung by men in the early days of the
mm.
church. It was the official music of the Catholic Church for 1,000 years.
Wow.
a
Wow.
thousand years,
That's
this
impressive.
very austere music. And so, I mean, I'm giving you music history now.
I love it. I
Gradually,
love
the
it. This is
harmony
great.
was allowed to trickle back in, but the church decided how, a third or a fourth, those are musical intervals, how one could proceed to the next, and the rules changed every century. So the harmonic system we have now in Western European societies was essentially um, determined by church, by Christianity. and
Mm,
and also there was this new focus on formal music, the difference between performers, specialists, and lay people. That difference got wider and wider. So as I said before, we're meant to move to music. This
mhm.
idea of being in a concert hall and being completely still and watching stars on stage is really something that goes against our evolution as
Ah,
musical beings. We are inherently wired for music. And
ah,
so again, the Christian fathers had reasons for this, and now music is a part of lots of worship, many kinds of worship within Christianity. I'm not trying to
mhm,
disrespect that religion, but it had an effect on participation in music and everyday music making over centuries, I would say. And one thing that I've had the fortune to travel a great deal all over the world, and you see that other people don't feel shamed if they sing in a group a little bit off key. It's just part of the musical texture. No one will give you a funny look. And if you start doing that very young, you'll be comfortable with your voice. In
mm.
Brazil, for instance, everybody knows the national songs. They don't just have the anthem. Everyone's learned probably 50 or more songs that they'll suddenly start singing at a party or on the street or at the beach, and someone will have a guitar and everyone will drunkenly sing the chorus. It's wonderful, and there's
Mm,
no uptightness around being good at it. People
mhm.
feel a sense of permission to participate and join in, and people will play instruments that without being musicians, they'll just pick up a tambourine or whatever, and it's wonderful to see this.
Mhm.
I hope that
And
answers your question.
it does answer the question, but I need to ask a different kind of question. And this might be outside the realm of your research in the book and asking more of a personal opinion based on the research you did for your book. But it's the idea of what about somebody who wants to play music now? They're listening to us, they're getting excited about you, they wanna go and read Wired for Music, and they wanna pick up an instrument. They're not even sure which one, but they wanna either start singing, start playing, start dancing, start doing something, but there's that little inner critic and inner judge that's saying, "You're gonna be off key, you're not any good. Remember what your mom said, remember what the choir said," blah, whatever it might be. What would be your advice, your suggestions for somebody to move into music?
Believe it or not, despite all that cello training, I can
Yeah?
relate to those feelings
Yeah.
because I was sort of programmed to be playing up here, this level. And so when I started playing new instruments, I had to get over playing badly. I even thought of calling my book Playing Badly. The marketers wouldn't have liked it, but that's the idea. I want to encourage people to be okay with playing badly. No one plays at this level right when they start. Nobody, absolutely
Mhm,
nobody, not Yo Yo Ma, not anybody.
mhm,
So that's one thing. I can relate to those feelings. It depends on what the person wants to do. I will tell you that there are choirs in the United States and in England that have names like can't sing choirs and tone deaf choirs, where they understand this negative
Yeah.
self-concept people have around music, and they're open to people who feel that they cannot sing, and they find ways to encourage and help people get over it and help people feel welcome. And so that is one piece of advice. Go to a teacher or a group that embraces beginners. And
Mhm.
so when I started drumming, for instance, I went to a group where they had many different levels learning at once, and the stronger ones pull along the weaker ones, and there's safety in numbers. And the teacher is absolutely lovely. She encourages people to laugh when they make a mistake because everybody does. It's just a lovely way to learn music that's completely different from how many of us were taught as children. And then another I mentioned also in the book, people who started even very difficult instruments like the violin or the cello at
Mm,
age 65 for the
mm.
first time. And one woman said the day she took her first cello lesson is more meaningful to her than her own birthday because it
Wow.
changed her life. And so it is possible, but find a teacher that enjoys working with adults and who has the same mindset of encouraging, inviting, not criticizing and browbeating.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful advice. Thank you. I have a different kind of question again, and this is, I don't know, it might seem odd to you, but I'm going to throw it out there and see what you do with it. This show is called Zero Limits Living, and it's really an exploration of limits. Do we have any limits? If we do have any limits, how do we get rid of the limits? How do we remove them? Can music, or maybe the better question is, how can music help remove the internal limits we might have?
Well, I think in my chapter in spiritual growth,
Mm,
I kind of go to some wild places in that chapter. And I mean, people have out of body experiences with music. They have a sense of the boundaries between self and the universe slipping away. Like
mm,
music can give people experiences that are similar to the effects of hallucinogens, this
yeah.
sense of oneness. And what's interesting is that neuroscientists have studied that, and they've found that some of these effects occur even without any substances consumed, that
Mm,
our brains seem to go into an abstract place and into a spiritual place with music if we allow ourselves to, if we get immersed in it. And repetitive drumming, some believe, might be the genesis of spiritual thought in our species or spiritual experience in our species, the trancy feeling that people get
yeah.
when they hear a repetitive rhythm. So, in answer to your question, I've had the fortune to explore the outer limits of music in villages in Africa who
Mhm.
believe that music is a way to connect with their ancestors, and by this they mean quite literally. They feel that their ancestors may possess them in a musical ritual. And
Wow.
this is pretty wild stuff for us in North America. Whether you see that as a metaphor or as, I mean, neuroscientists might characterize that as a brain state, an altered brain state, whether
Mm.
it's a metaphor or an altered brain state or a myth, who knows? If people want to explore the outer limits, this type of exploration of music can be part of it.
I love it. I love it. When you knew we were going to be talking and I was going to interview you and you were speculating and probably imagining what the questions might be, what was the question you were hoping I would ask?
I was hoping you would ask, what do I want people to take away from this book? That
You
would
know,
be a question.
that is a great question. What do you want people to take away from your book, Wired for Music?
I want people to take away this sense of themselves as a musical being and
Hmm.
an understanding of the deep roots of musicality in our species. And in chapter 2, I go way back to the time of Paleolithic tools when we're chipping rock against rock to create, you know, it's hand axes to carve
Mm,
flesh so we can eat it. There's a belief that that chipping of rock on rock was the beginning of rhythmic ability in humans, perhaps
mm,
because we're wiring our brains to move and listen to rhythm in groups. And I mean, it's more involved than that. The genesis of pitch perception too happened very, very long ago. And I want people to know that newborn babies' brains will show responses to rhythm in a way that baby monkeys' brains do not. At
Mm,
birth, while they're asleep, our brains are wired for music. The people who cannot entrain to a beat or cannot um, hear different pitches they're very rare in it's something like 2% or less.
mm,
That's very few of us, and that's considered a neurological condition.
mm,
Most of us have these abilities without having to work for them, and this is a wonderful thing. And so my heart breaks when I hear people, and there are many people who say, I'm not musical, I'm tone deaf, I couldn't carry a beat to save my life. It saddens me because I think a lot of that is cultural, and the negative messages people got as children. And if
mm,
my book could do anything, it would be to tell people even the ability to enjoy music is a deeply complex cognitive set of skills that we have.
mm.
Almost all of us have that, and to own that and feel that inside.
That's beautiful. What music did you listen to right before getting on this interview?
Well, sometimes I listen to Eva Cassidy. She's a singer who passed away a long time ago, and
Yeah.
her music really brings me to tears. It's beautiful. And I also like Congolese sukus music, which is very upbeat. And I think I listen to a bit of both of those. But I listen wide. I love Brazilian music. I love
Uh,
jazz. I love pop music of some kinds. Not as much pop, but some pop I enjoy if it's danceable and a little more rhythmically complex.
This has been a fascinating interview. We're running out of time here. In the last moment, 60 seconds or so, I want people to go get Wired for Music, but what do you want them to think about, or what do you want them to do? Yes, go get your book, Wired for Music. But is there a takeaway? Is there a thought? Is there a challenge? Is there a quote? What comes to mind that you want people to seize and take away?
That music is a tool. They're the tool for everyday life to enhance our everyday life. And
Hmm.
another thing, if you don't like meditating, and I'm one of the people who doesn't like meditating, I have a family history that explains that, but music can offer some of the same benefits if you're sitting quietly and mindfully listening with your headphones on. It was even studied head to head with mindfulness training in people. In a small study, more work needs to be done. I'll say that again as a caveat. But if you
Mhm.
listen regularly to music, calming music with your eyes closed, and really let yourself sink into that experience, you will have some of the same benefits of mindfulness training.
That's wonderful. And as one author to another, I have to ask, what are you writing next?
I can't say. It's a little bit like I do have my next idea, but my book's only been out for about 6 weeks, so it's a
Mhm.
bit about giving birth to a baby and then saying when's number two.
When's the next baby coming?
Yeah,
Got
yeah,
it.
but I
I
do have an
respect
idea
that.
that's a little bit adjacent to this book, and
Mhm.
I'm going to leave it under wraps for now because I haven't
Totally
even
understand.
sold the proposal yet.
I was just trying to see what I can get away with.
Oh yeah.
So thank you, Adriana Barton. Thank you for coming here. Thanks for your wisdom. Thanks for sharing your insights. And thanks for writing your book, Wired for Music. I imagine it's everywhere from Amazon to bookstores,
It is.
wherever books are
It is.
sold.
And
Is
thank you
there,
for your excellent questions. There was also an audiobook,
that
which
was
I
my
was,
question. Yeah.
yes, I actually had to audition to narrate my own audiobook.
What?
I did. And people are saying that they really like it, which was really nice because I didn't get to listen to it myself before it went out. It just, the production company said, yep, it's good, off it goes. And so, but people are getting great feedback on that too, for people who prefer to listen than read on paper. That is, and there's also an ebook available, basically wherever you can buy audiobooks or wherever you can
It's
buy
there.
regular books. It's there. Yeah.
All right. Wired for Music. Go get it. A search for health and joy through the science of sound. I'm Dr. Jill Vitale. You've been watching or listening to Zero Limits Living. I'm putting all these episodes online at zerolimitslivingtv.com, but you can see it or hear it on 1,000 platforms around the world, including Roku, Amazon, Apple, and probably anything you can name. Also, go get your free session around Miracles Coaching. Go find out what it's all about. It's 20 years old. It's a system that works. It's trademarked. It's my own personal creative product. Go to miraclescoaching.com. Check out mentaltimetravelsystem.com, my new program. And meanwhile, thank Lux Media Studios for making this possible, Candace Barr for believing in me, Chris, who's running the equipment there, and for all of you who's watching this. Go play an instrument, go listen to music, go sing, and expect miracles. Thanks.
Glutathione is a big word. It's the body's own master antioxidant. It's a scavenger for free radicals, bacteria, and viruses. There are no products in the market with the ingredient NASET. NASET increases the production of glutathione that's in our body already to strengthen and enhance our immune system, elevate sense of well-being, support muscle strength and endurance, cognitive function, and liver support. It helps with increased energy and blood sugar regulation. Get your bottle of GSH Plus from www.salvationnutra.com.